We are the Ben Kinsella Trust, a knife crime prevention charity. In this series, we'll be talking to a variety of people who have all been affected by knife crime. They'll be sharing their stories with us, telling us how they managed to cope with such tragedy and what they're doing now to help end knife crime. Some of the topics that we'll be discussing may be upsetting, so listener caution is advised. We'll be sharing some helpful links at the end of the session. Thank you, Brooke, for joining us today to speak about yourself, your family, and of course Ben and the Trust. So before we talk about Ben, tell me about yourself and your family.
Oh, where to begin? It's the hardest question, isn't it, to just get going on, and also to talk about yourself. I think I'm so used to talking about other people. Tell you about me. So I'm Brooke Kinsella. I am founder of the Ben Kinsella Trust. I am sister of Ben. I'm mum to baby Ben and Elsie. That's probably what defines me, I think. Yeah. That's me. I'm the eldest sibling of 4 children. So Ben was the only boy in the house and, surrounded by girls. And my dad, obviously. But yeah, he was just mollycoddled and smothered by his sisters, really.
Oh, that's just beautiful.
He held his own.
Did he?
He definitely did.
Oh, that's amazing. So there's 4 girls?
3 girls, 1 boy. And Ben. Yeah. We were very lucky. I think the best thing about us is there was myself and my sister Jade, and then Ben and Georgia came along 8 or so years later. So there was quite a gap.
Yeah.
But it never really felt like that. And actually it was one of the things I loved the most about my relationship with Ben and now my relationship with Georgia is that we were still the best of friends.
Yeah.
We still had so many things in common, but we all grew up together. Dad George is a taxi driver. Mum's office manager, done many a thing. Just a normal family, really.
Yeah. So you said you had a wonderful childhood, wonderful upbringing, and what made it wonderful?
I think looking back, and actually the first thing that pops to mind is because of my childhood, I always said I wanted hundreds of kids. I wanted
How do you still feel
4.
about that?
Oh, I'm sticking at 2. I'm absolutely okay with 2.
Yeah.
I wanted lots of kids because I just loved being around my brother and sisters. They were and remain my very best friends in the world, my allies. So, there was a combination of ages, but we would all, just hang out with each other and that would be okay and we'd have the best time. And, we never had much, but what we had was enough and it was amazing. And my mum and dad did absolutely, all they could to give us a nice life and give us the things that we wanted. And we all had our different hobbies and activities. And, my mum and dad would ferry us all around. Jade and I were Irish dancing and Ben and Georgia were football, and Georgia was better than Ben at football and he hated that. And
I bet.
It was so normal, looking back until obviously, the abnormal happened.
Yeah.
For a long time, it was just lovely and normal.
Yeah, amazing. So tell me a bit more about Ben then, because you said that he was mollycoddled by you and your sisters, but you said he held his own. So tell me a little bit about his personality. Who was Ben?
Oh, it's so funny to look back and think who he was, because it's obviously 16 years now. It's such a long time ago. And it's hard to reflect on who he was without wondering about who he would have been.
Right.
I think overwhelmingly for me, and I have always said since we lost Ben, it's very easy to paint the people that you lose as, angels or saints. And he wasn't. He really wasn't. He was a 16-year-old boy, and they can be really, really annoying and many other things. But weirdly, I look at 16-year-olds now, and I've got, godchildren who are that age, and I know children who are that age, and they are children. They are so young.
Yes.
They are babies. But when I look back at Ben at being 16, he didn't feel like a baby. You could already see the man he was going to be. You could see that in him, which was incredible, really. I mean, obviously he had so many more formative years to come, and I don't know how he would have ended up. But at that time, he he didn't feel like he was 16. He was a very old soul, but then equally, you know, the biggest child and clown you would ever find. He was happy-go-lucky. He really was. You know, my dad always says he was born with his eyes wide open. He always had a smile on his face, always. Unless Arsenal lost, that was it. He just really loved life, like he did, even at 16. And he found the fun in everything, and he was fun to be around. And I was 25 when he was 16, and I genuinely really liked spending time with him. And my friends that would come round to spend time with me, I'd find them sitting with him because that was the kind of boy he was. I think the things that come into my head, you know, they just pop in randomly, you know, every now and then. It's the smallest things. It's him just coming into my room and, you know, watching Friends, just sitting there with me. And again, I was 25 and he was 16, but he'd just sneak down from his room. He was at the top and sit at the bottom of my bed, or, you know, sit next to me with his really stinky feet. Because, you know,
a precious memory.
16-year-old boys.
Yeah.
and just sit and watch Friends with me. And we, you know, we didn't need to talk, but we just had that connection. And he loved Harry Potter like me. We would read those books religiously together and fight when we got one and talk about that. You know, I would, like, the memory that always pops in is just he'd drive me mad, but he'd always forget his door keys, and he'd ring the bell, and I can still see him now, and I'd open the window and say, "Oh, Ben," and he'd just be looking up at me with that cheeky smile going, "Let me in." But then to pay me back, he'd go around the shop and get me, you know, my favourite chocolate and a Lucozade, and that was our thing. And it's just those small things, those, again, I keep saying the word normal, but just everyday normal little things between a sister and a brother. I mean, there's probably lots of, you know, bigger ones. Him doing a performance dressed as a Spice Girl will forever, you know, be one of my favourite memories. He embraced it so much.
Which Spice Girl was he?
Baby Spice. I had to think then. Baby Spice. And yeah, he, you know, again, 16, he wasn't worried about being cool. He didn't, that didn't matter to him. He just wanted to make people laugh, and he threw himself into that. It was just the tiny little everyday things those are the things that stick with me.
And they're the big things, aren't they? As a parent myself, I'm always told it's the little things that end up being the big things. It's the everyday things that we experience with the people that we love.
Absolutely.
And the things that
we
matter
miss the most. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. In your own time, whenever you're comfortable to, are you able to tell me what happened to Ben in 2008?
Yes. It's a story I've told, well, I've lost count how many times I've told it now. That always actually still just feels like a story, like it's a story I'm telling that happened to somebody else. But yeah, so it was 2008, so it's 16 years ago. And my mum and dad and my sister, my baby sister Georgia, had gone away for the weekend. We had like a little holiday home in Kent, and they'd gone away. And I always say this because I think I always feel the guilt. I carry that guilt of it. Is that I was in charge, I felt. And I was doing a play at the time. It was the opening night of a play. I in my former life, I say a former life, I was an actress for many years. So at that time of my life, I was opening a play, and I'd popped in to see Ben that day randomly. He'd got a new job in a internet cafe locally in Islington, and he was absolutely loving it. He felt so grown up, and I'd randomly just popped in, and I remember watching him do his thing and just being so proud, and just, you know, watching him be all grown up and serve all the customers with a smile on his face. And I went and said hello and hung out there for a bit, and then I went and got him McDonald's. And then I said, he told me he was going out that night, and I said, well, I'll be doing the play. I'll see you in the morning. And never did. And yeah, I came home from the play. Weirdly, on an opening night of a play, you celebrate after, you have a drink. And I didn't that night. I don't know why. I did and do like a drink. I didn't. I just came home, but I went to bed early, and I put my phone on silent, which is something, again, to this day that I feel extremely guilty about. But my house phone rang at about 2 a.m, and it was my sister Jade screaming, a noise that I will never forget. And she just said, "Ben's been stabbed." And obviously when you're wrenched from sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, it literally, I just thought, I am having a nightmare. I'm literally having a nightmare. This is what this is. But it wasn't. It was real. And I then had to call my mum and tell her, and that remains to this day the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do, even in the entire process of what we then had to go through losing Ben. Then now after that phone call was awful, to wrench my mum from sleep and say those words to her.
Yeah. How did you tell her?
Do you know, I can't really remember. I think I've absolutely blocked it out. I remember the noise she made. I don't know the words I used. I imagine I just said, "Mum, Ben's been stabbed." But at that point, I didn't know anything. I didn't know. That's all I knew. And I don't think at that point, obviously I was petrified, but I don't think at that point there was even a question that he wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh God, he's been really hurt, or has he been really hurt? What's happened? I didn't know. And obviously my priority was just get to him. So I jumped in a taxi and got to the hospital, where I met my sister and my mum and dad, and my younger sister Georgia got there, and it was just hours of waiting while he was obviously being operated on.
So you described to us that you had a phone call and you went to the hospital. But what actually had happened that led to Ben being taken to hospital?
Obviously, it takes a while to find out answers, which is torture in itself, really. There isn't really a reason, and I think there is no reason that would make anything okay. But quite simply, Ben went out that night. He'd just finished his GCSEs, so it was summer for him. He was on his holidays, basically, and he went out with some friends to celebrate. He loved music, like I said earlier, and there was a DJ playing, a local bar, local pub, and he went with a big group of friends, of his school friends, to celebrate finishing their exams. From what we obviously heard later and in the trial, there was a fight in this bar that night that Ben had absolutely nothing to do with, and not even was in the party of the people that were fighting. But one of the defendants who went on to kill Ben later was involved in this argument or fight, left the bar, was clearly very angry about what had happened, and called on two of his friends to come and help him.
Okay.
They came back to the bar, at which point it was closing time. So, all of the people and the were coming out. And these three men, I'll call them men, they were all old enough to be called men.
How old were they?
18 and 19. Yeah. They went looking for revenge, basically, and they started chasing groups of the boys up the road. It was a very long road, and the young boys were all very scared. I think they probably didn't know what was going on. And basically Ben was at the back of a group running, and they caught him, and they stabbed him 11 times in 5 seconds is what we heard, which is numbers that I can't quite comprehend still, to be honest. But not for any reason, I don't think it was a mistaken identity. He absolutely categorically had nothing to do with what happened earlier. That was testified by so many people. They just I think wanted to get somebody back that evening, and sadly it was Ben.
So sorry you and your family have been through something so horrific. The court case that followed, how long after Ben's murder was that court case?
Oh goodness, I think it was about a year. I think it started the April or so after we lost him. So we had to wait a while. It went on for 7 or so weeks.
Wow.
In the Old Bailey, every day of just being there and hearing, the most awful words and things, and seeing the 3 defendants day in, day out. But I say lucky, there's no luck in this at all. We got a good result. We got the right result. All three of them were guilty. That doesn't happen to every family.
Yeah.
We got a good sentencing. I still don't know if it's long enough, in all honesty, but compared to others who weren't so lucky, it was a good sentencing.
How did your family cope in the aftermath of Ben's murder? The months after, the year after Ben's death, how did your family cope with processing what had happened?
I think in the first year, firstly, you've got to get through all the firsts. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
It's the first day without Ben. And then there's obviously the funeral to plan, which is horrendous, but it keeps you busy and distracts you. And then there's a court case and a trial and all of that, that kind of not only keeps you going, but just keeps you busy. And then there's first Christmas and Ben's first birthday and your first birthday and first Father's Day and Mother, and there's all those firsts that get you through the first year. So we just got through it. We had no other choice than to survive, really. I don't know how we got through it. Like, I think before losing Ben, I think if anyone tells you you're going to lose one of the people you love most in the world, you would say, I won't get through that. I couldn't get through that. But it's human nature, isn't it? It kicks in and you have to. My mum and dad got through it because they had other children. So we got each other through it. And then it's a passing of time, weirdly. It's a weird passing of time where it all feels like yesterday, but it all feels like an absolute lifetime. And sometimes you question, was he here? Was he even ever here? I
understand that. And you set up the Ben Kinsella Trust in Ben's legacy. And when was it that you set up the trust, and what was its aim?
We set the trust up pretty early on, actually. And I'm quite often asked for advice from other families who have lost people they love and want to do something in their name, which I completely understand. And they ask for my advice and how we did it. And actually, one of the things that I do say to people is, don't rush it, because we just jumped into it. We didn't really have a choice. I think for all of us, it was, again, a distraction.
Yeah.
It was almost selfish in that we wanted to keep Ben's name going. He'd been here for such a short space of time, and now it's been as long, as we had him, that he's been gone, literally this year. But we just wanted to keep him alive in some way. We really didn't want it to happen to somebody else as well. I think Ben was a key moment in this fight against knife crime, where we had lost so many lives that year, so many young lives. And then there was Ben, and it just seemed to kind of unite something in everybody that enough was enough, which really helped our cause, obviously. And obviously at that time I was an actress, so I'd been on EastEnders, so I had some profile. So in terms of media and awareness and coverage, it was just out there, and that also helped. But it just came from a place of, we can't let him be forgotten, and we can't let this happen to anybody else. What do we do? Yeah.
And what was the goal through setting up the trust then?
At that time, it was literally, we need to stop this happening to anybody else's son and brother. It was as simple as that. We didn't know how we were going to do that. We I've said my dad was a taxi driver, my mum was an office manager. I didn't really know what I was doing in life at that point. My youngest sister was 13. Jade was, bless her, absolutely broken. So we didn't know what we were doing. We were very lucky, and then we had lots of brilliant people rally around us to try and help. And we thought about lots of ideas, just as a family around the kitchen table, what can we do? And it just seemed to kind of, I guess, organically grow until where we are today, which is that, we prevent knife crime through education. Yeah. That's what we believe. We believe that prevention is better than cure. We believe that it can be stopped if we start early on and educate our kids about this issue.
You spoke about Ben's death being 16 years ago and him being 16 when he died. So he's not been here for as long as he was here. And do you find that there are certain anniversaries that create that sort of reflection, where you look back and think, okay, that happened. Where am I now with my feelings about what happened? And do those feelings change at all?
They do. They change day by day, year by year. You know, you can have many, many good weeks, and then something just gets you, and you never know. That's the hardest thing, I think. You know, obviously, every Christmas is a struggle. Every Christmas, it always will be, because somebody's missing. My wedding day was, there was somebody missing. Having my children and naming my son, who was born on the day we lost Ben, which you know is a miracle in some ways, but equally is quite tough, because on the 29th of June, I just want to stay in bed and cry all day. And now I can't, because it's my son's birthday, and I've got to get up and part of me thinks that was Ben just sending him, going, you can't do that anymore. You can't. So there's the big occasions and life occasions that obviously you'll always miss him, or you'll think about him. But then there can just be the most random thing that you see or that you think about that brings memories back as well. And it is living in a bit of a limbo, I guess, and time doesn't heal at all. It really doesn't. You just kind of learn to live with it a bit easier each year that passes, really. Especially when you have kids as well, because you can't just sit around and be sad. And now I see, not only do I see what my mum and dad did for us and how brave they were and how incredible they were, but I mean, I also just don't know how they did it, really, because they probably didn't have their time to grieve like they wanted, because they had to carry on for the rest of us. And that just must have been so hard.
And like you sort of said at the start as well, seeing it through that different perspective, the eyes of your mum and dad, because now you're a parent, and the strength of your parents to get through losing a child is unbearable as a parent to even consider. So going forward, the aim of the trust is to educate and to prevent this from happening to any other family. So what would you like to see happen?
Oh, it's such a big question.
It is a big question.
It's such a big question, and it's so hard, because we've been fighting this fight for such a long time now. And I love the trust, and I am so proud of the trust and the work it does. But essentially, I don't want the trust to have to exist. That's what I want. I don't want any of us to have to be doing this. Yeah. And I don't feel like 16 years on that, we've come a huge long way. I think we did. We've done such brilliant things, and for a time we did. And now I look at the statistics, and I look at the papers, and I look at the news, and I just worry that we're almost going backwards. And that scares me, especially, again, bringing a boy into the world, and a girl, but bringing children into the world. And it almost feels like, do we need to start again? But that's exhausting. I think what I want to see happen, obviously, I don't want to lose any more young people to knives, or anybody to knives at all. That's what I want to happen. I think what I would like to see is everybody recognising this problem, because, genuinely, until it happens to you, it's really easy to think it will never happen to you. I was very much guilty of that, and you don't think it's going to happen to you, and then it does. And obviously there are lots of problems in this world that people suffer with and lose people to, but this is terrible. This is, for our young people, for the next generation, it's really, really hard. And so what I want is people to recognise the problem, to talk about the problem, to not brush it under the carpet, to raise awareness. Like I say, we try to educate so that when that young child, if they ever get to a situation, and most people don't, but if they do, where they are faced with picking up a knife, they make the right choice. And that's what it's about. It's about getting in there at that point. And I want more of us to do that. Whether you are a parent, I will be talking to my children. I'll have to, because I'll have to tell them about their Uncle Ben and why he's not here. That I don't know how to even start with that conversation, but I'm going to have to. But even if you haven't lost someone to knife crime, your children will be around it. They will be susceptible to it. They will know about it.
Yes.
And I wish that we could keep our children innocent for as long as we can. They're not, especially in this time and day and age.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably know about it anyway, and they're probably really scared about it. And so have that chat and reassure them and teach them what's right and wrong. And yeah, I just would like us all to it's the smallest thing, but I think it would have the biggest impact, is to do our bit to raise awareness about the issue.
And it is just one aspect, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We are a charity that looks at prevention through education, but there are so many other organisations and services.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be that village approach, doesn't it? That we can all work together to prevent this from happening to any other family. So a final message for anyone who's listening to the podcast. What's one thing that everyone can do? And I think we might have even covered this in what you said there, but what's the one thing that everyone listening to this should do to help make a difference towards stopping knife crime?
I think it's simply the one thing everybody can do. Obviously as a charity, charities are always looking for funding to keep going and many different things. And not everybody has money to donate, but we can all talk about it. We can all share the story.
Yeah.
We can share Ben's story. We're 16 years on, and it astounds me how many people come up to me and know my brother's name. Like, it makes me so proud, but they know his story. Other countries, I will visit, and I will get messages on Instagram still to this day about people that met Ben and encountered him in life and just want to let me know about that meeting. And it's amazing. It's incredible. He has touched so many lives when he was here and by not being here. So sharing his story, or not just Ben's story, we have so sadly lost so many young people to knife crime.
Yeah.
Share a story, just talk about it and keep raising that awareness, because everybody can do that.
Yes. And I think as well, we spoke about Ben when he was young, and he sounds like a very entertaining character. And we spoke about life after Ben as well. And like you say, Ben Kinsella is known for what happened to him a lot of the time. But actually, what would you like people to remember Ben for?
Oh, it's so hard if you didn't know him. And so, one of my biggest regrets in life is that the people I love the most, my husband and my 2 children, will never know him.
Yeah.
The people that are that important to me will not know the person that was so important to me. And so I try to tell them, what he was like, and just keep him alive in some way. He was so kind, and I'm not just being a proud big sister. I'm not just being biased.
Yeah.
He would do anything for anybody. And when we lost him, the amount of letters we got through the door of stories from people that he had helped in the smallest way to the biggest way randomly that we never knew about.
Wow.
At the age of 16, I think, at 16, you can be just quite, in your own mind and on your path in life, and not really be worrying about the world and the community. And actually, this whole legacy and, Ben's trust started from a letter that he had written to Gordon Brown that we found in his coursework book, where he was so worried about youth crime and the state of society.
Yeah.
And it was that made us go, that's a 16-year-old boy worrying about this. I had no concept that he was worried about this, but he cared. He cared about other people. And I think that's what I'd like people to know about him.
What an amazing legacy he leaves behind. And he continues to give, educating, I think it was well over 6,000 young people that came to our exhibitions last year. It's quite phenomenal.
We're proud of him.
I bet you are. I would be too. Thank you so much, Brooke. We really do appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our wonderful guests for sharing their experience. And thank you too for listening to the Ben Kinsella Trust podcast. If you've been affected by knife crime or have been a victim of crime, you can get support from victimsupport.org.uk or from supportline.org.uk. And Catch 22 also offer victim support services in some areas. For help with bereavement, visit cruise.org.uk, and Mind offer a range of mental health support services at mind.org.uk. Finally, to find out more about the Ben Kinsella Trust and the services we offer, visit our own website at benkinsella.org.uk. We can't solve knife crime until everyone recognises this issue and their own role within it. So please help us by sharing this podcast with friends and family on your social media or WhatsApp groups. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can stop knife crime.